What's up, everybody? Brady Figuel here, coming at you with a review of the most recent Boundaries album, Death is Little More. It was released on March 29th of this year, and although I've said in multiple videos that I don't really like talking about albums that are over, a few months old, I guess, I did just talk about this album in my top 10 albums of 2024 video. And I just never really got around to listening or reviewing this album until later towards the end of the year when I saw other creators actually talking and saying some pretty good things about it. So I wanted to check it out. And I'm glad I did. I honestly don't know why I never really checked it out when it first released. I think it might be because of just Boundaries. I feel like the new metalcore stereotype band name is just geographical terms pluralized. Either geographical or something relating to nature. So you got boundaries, currents, landmarks, intervals is another one. I feel like this now is kind of like how Verb the Noun bands were in the early 2010s. That's what this is, the new version of Verb the Noun band. And those other bands that I mentioned, I'm honestly not really a big fan of. I've tried to be, I'm not. So that's probably why I skipped it in the first place, but I'm glad that I gave it a chance. I really am. Because what Boundaries have done with this album, as I just said in my top 10 albums of the year video, is they have pretty much done a fresh take on original metalcore, whether it's the late 90s metallic hardcore stuff or the early mid-2000s melodic metalcore. They kind of combine both of those sounds. The vocals on this album, especially the harsh vocals, very much are reminiscent of more of that metallic hardcore sound that bands like Integrity and Hatebreed pioneered in the late 90s, and that bands like Kubla Khan and Knocked Loose are really re-pioneering now. In addition to that, the clean vocals as well are very well done in a sense that they are produced and performed in a way that don't sound generic or overly polished. The overall sound and the overall production of this album is angry rather than just meandering angst like a lot of the modern metalcore bands I listed before kind of sound like. But this anger is often matched with more of that melodic sensibility that early Killswitch Engage or early As I Lay Dying would give you. I think the opening track, Turning Hate into Rage, is an excellent instance of this blend. In the intro, you get those frantic drums and those dissonant chords that are very hardcore-esque, but about halfway through the song, that breakdown kicks in, you get more of those melodic chords floating over. And the final third of this track almost leans into deathcore territory with that real chunky breakdown and those, sort of Bring Me the Horizon, Count Your Blessings style note choices. And that groovy riff right before the breakdown hits, that just instantly brought to mind that album for me for some reason. The main riff of the next track, Darkness Shared, is another highlight on the album as far as riffs for me. I love that interchanging between the more breakdown, palm muted type parts and those real mean sounding tremolo riffs. And then it just flawlessly and so smoothly kicks into those verses that have more of that melodic metalcore feel again with the 5/7/8 riffs. You get the clean vocals later in the song that again fuse really well with that mean tremolo riff. This is probably maybe my favorite song on the album, at least in the top 3. The track Easily Erased is one of the more melodic cuts on here. Definitely maybe one of the more slightly generic sounding ones, but the soaring clean vocals in the chorus and the surrounding parts of that chorus being really intense still with the vocals and the instrumentals make this still a pretty good song. Another thing this album does really well that is highlighted on this track is they tend to deviate quite a bit from the standard verse, chorus, bridge, chorus formula, which with those, on this song in particular, with those more common, I guess, sensibilities between the clean vocals and the screams. If it was in that rigid formula that we've seen in metalcore for the last 2 decades now, I really don't think the song would have hit as hard as it does. Those changes in the song structure really add to the song and make it a lot less generic sounding, which I appreciate. Curse to Remember and Face the Blade are 2 of my favorite songs on this album as well. Just the throwback to the early 2000s metalcore on these 2 songs is amazing. Those ringing melodies in the background and a lot of, especially in Curse to Remember, a lot of those, again, sort of 5/7/8 type riffs that just reek of early 2000s. And even that little spoken word section in the bridge of Face the Blade, I actually thought was pretty well done and adds to that feeling of nostalgia as well. The title track is one that you think just starting out that was going to be one of the more straight hardcore tracks on here, which there are quite a few of those, which I'll get into. But then like this guitar lead comes out of nowhere. It almost has this exotic feel to it that I find is really cool and adds a lot to the album as well. Scars on a Soul is another track on here that pretty much just is straight up hardcore up until those clean vocals kick in about 2/3 of the way through. But songs like Petals from a Stem and Blood-Soaked Salvation featuring Matt from Kubla Khan are two songs on here that are just straightforward hardcore tracks. Matt Honeycutt sounds awesome and right at home on Blood-Soaked Salvation. I also especially love the blast beats that kick in as the song nears to its end. Another guest feature I really enjoyed on this album is Marcus Vick from Invent Animate, who appears on the track Blame's Burden, which is probably the most melodic cut on here. It opens with some clean guitar parts. And the clean vocals on this song are very well done. They provide for, again, a bit of a, I don't want to say departure, but something different and something that keeps the album fresh sounding. Because this is the most melodic cut on the album, and it is pretty close to the end of the album as well. I also really like Inhale the Grief, which is the closing track on here. This song, again, just strikes that balance so well between the melody and the aggression. There's like lots of conflicting sounds in this song, but Boundaries just make it work so well together. And it does not at all feel pieced together or robotic or any kind of criticism along that nature that a lot of metalcore like this tends to get. If I could single out like one thing that I appreciate most about this album is that it rejects this polished modern metalcore sound that not only the octane core type bands like your Falling Under Verses and your I Prevails and your Motionless in Whites have been beating to death over the last 10 years, but also that new age metalcore style like bands like Currents and Invent Animate have been doing. And I mean that both as far as style, which I've already given several examples as far as them doing that, but also just in the production. The production of this album is dry, it sounds raw, but not any kind of like lo-fi or run down or anything like that. It sounds fresh and clear still, especially in the clean vocals. The clean vocals on this album are produced very well, and although at times I do think his voice does sound a bit generic, the production and the instrumentals really make it so that is never really an issue throughout the whole album. I also have to compliment the lyrics on here. A lot of the lyrics on here are very relatable, they're very clear and distinct, but not dumbed down. They deal with things such as betrayal and heartbreak and just raw anger at times, which I can really relate to, as I'm sure many of you can really relate to. And relatability as far as lyrics go is maybe the most important aspect of lyrics, at least in my opinion. Like, I get really tired of hearing songs with lyrics where you just don't know what the hell they're fucking talking about. Like the whole caught in the undertow type thing that's been going, I don't know if you want to say viral, but that's been kind of starting to get memed in the metalcore community. Anything like that, I'm really not a fan of. And on this album, for the most part, Boundaries do a good job of avoiding that style of lyricism. So that's about it for this video. Definitely watch my top 10 albums of 2024 video that I just uploaded to see where this album fits on that list. As far as score goes, I'm going to score this album a 26 out of 30. And again, I'm very glad that I discovered this album when I did. I was really just looking for as many albums as possible to listen to make sure I didn't miss any in my top 10 list, because nothing is worse than, at least for me as a YouTuber, thinking so much about my top 10 albums of the year and then uploading it and putting the work in to upload it, and then a week later you find an album that would have been like in the top 5. And shout out to Boundaries here for making an angry yet nostalgic listening experience, especially in terms of metalcore. So as always, thank you guys very much for watching. Definitely leave your thoughts on this album in the comments below. I'd love to discuss them as always, and until next time, I'll see you guys later. Peace.